Click subscribe to get daily Manchester United content from passionate Reds, only on All for United.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are following us. We are back on All for United, and I am back on the channel after a little hiatus. I'm Grant, I'm your host for a very special show. We're going to be really talking about more movements in the new Manchester United managerial process. And I'm delighted to be joined by a guy who has got so much experience in Dutch football. He's an interviewer of many professional footballers and managers. He is the one and only James Rowe. James, warm welcome to you. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you, Grant. Thank you for a lovely introduction as well. Pleased to be on and looking forward to the show.
It's great to have you on board, James. And for all people who follow the channel, please remember to like and subscribe. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and other social media platforms. James, as I mentioned in my intro there, you have spoken to a range of professional footballers and managers, but you're based in the Netherlands. And I think this is why this show about Ten Hag is very apt for someone like yourself to come on. So give us a little bit of a flavour as to what you do and what you're all about.
Yeah, sounds good. My name is James Rowe. I'm a British football writer who's been based in the Netherlands for almost 2 decades now. I have over 6 years' experience interviewing professional players and managers from all different levels of world football. Dutch players in their mother tongue, Spanish players in their mother tongue as well. And been very fortunate the last 6 years to have interviewed over 400 professional players and managers, including the likes of Frans Hoek, who's goalkeeping coach to Louis van Gaal for the Dutch national team at the moment, the likes of Jamie Carragher, Graham Potter of Brighton when he was Oosterson's manager, also Viv Anderson and the likes of Enrique van Wolfswinkel and Arne Friedrich, who played for Germany and was sporting director of Hertha Berlin. So a great portfolio to look back on with pride the last 6 years, but it's always about not just the footballing story, but also the human story behind the football manager or the football player.
And you've made some fantastic contacts and written some terrific articles on a range of different websites and other places. And later on, I'll explain to James, or James can explain to you guys, I should say, where you could go and access some of his terrific works. And we're going to actually have a really good discussion on this because James, being based in the Netherlands and has a really strong knowledge on the Dutch football scene, will give us a really good discussion, I feel, about Erik Ten Hag, and he's being linked to replace Ralf Rangnick at the end of the season, or perhaps even earlier, who knows, as the new Manchester United manager. But James, let's have a little bit of a kind of early stage chronology, or chronological order, I should say, about Ten Hag's career so far. Just give us a little bit of a flavour about his journey into management, because I believe as a player, he was very much Eredivisie based, wasn't he? He was very much a Dutch football player, first and foremost, before he went into management.
Absolutely. With 3 spells at FC Twente and having a massive heart for the club, winning the Dutch Cup, KNVB in 2001, where they beat PSV on penalties. Also won the division with the Graafschap Cup. He won his playing career. Also spells at FC Utrecht and RKC Waalwijk as well. A very hard-working player, a central defender who worked extremely hard, was very studious, had a great curiosity about the game of football. And obviously that took into his management career, where he's already at the age, in his early 50s, at the age of 52, has accrued so much experience, both at home and abroad. And he's found a real home with Ajax. It's done great work at all the places he's been at, but he's always been very, very modest, always put the plaudits towards his players and his backroom staff. And it's always been a collective team effort.
Yeah, I mean, he's you mentioned earlier on in your discussion there, James, obviously a central defender by trade. And the Dutch over the years have really been ingrained with a lot of really strong centre halves, that leadership, haven't they? Do you think that that's something that has really helped him going into his management career?
I think so. I think it's the awareness of what it takes to become a professional footballer. Having spoken to many professional players and managers, Grant, I don't think some fans realise the hard journey that most players and managers have been on. Most professionals have to sacrifice their youth. You know, the normal youth that you and I identify with, of playing football with your mates and doing the normal things that teenagers do. A lot of players didn't really experience that. It was very much about the football club, being at the football club, receiving your education about what it's like to respect your opponents, to respect your teammates, to respect your coaches, and how hard you have to work to become a professional footballer. It's something which many people have to give literally their lives for to achieve, and also to find a level. I mean, I've spoken to many Dutch players that came through the famous Ajax Youth Academy, and they always talk extremely highly about the grounding they received to go on to play for other Eredivisie clubs such as FC Groningen, for example, FC Utrecht, and going on to have fine careers in that respect.
Mm-hmm. So as a player, did Ten Hag really do all the sort of leadership, that authoritative nature at the back, or was he one of these guys that liked to venture forward? Did he like to have a style of play? Just give us a little bit of a flavour on his playing style.
I think his playing style was very much being part of the collective and working within a team. It wasn't a star name as a player. He was a player who worked extremely hard in the collective of a good working and functioning football team, and being aware of his role within a team. Because that's another thing which people need to understand, is that when you are a defender, when you're a midfielder, when you are an attacker, you have a specific role to fulfill as an individual and also part of a team. And in his case, it was very much he puts himself at the point of the collective to make sure that he does his best to do the best he can for the team to win football matches and to go on to have a decent career as well, to play for 3 stints at FC Twente, to also play for RKC Waalwijk and FC Utrecht. It's not easy to stay at that level. It's not easy. So he's done very, very well, and as a manager, he's done even better. But I think his curiosity as a player was always going to lead into management. But I don't think his teammates at the clubs that he was playing at, I don't think they would have foreseen him to become a manager at such a high level so quickly within his career.
Yeah, and let's talk about his management career, because his first job was at a club called Go Ahead Eagles. Now, I personally don't know an awful lot about the club, and this is where you come in. Give us a little bit of a flavour as to what Go Ahead Eagles was all about and how that sort of helped him get on the managerial ladder.
Well, first and foremost, they were an extremely well-respected football club in the Netherlands. The club were also extremely good to me in the time that I went in 2017 to interview their then striker, Leon de Kogel. And I was extremely well received by the club. They're extremely professional. The ground in Deventer is a lovely football ground in the middle of a residential area. And it has a little bit of an English feel, really. And Mark Overmars was there. And lots of people will say about Mark Overmars' success, which is true, but he did an even better job at Go Ahead Eagles. They were staring into the abyss. You didn't know what was going to happen, if the club was going to be wound up, if there were going to be sanctions involved, and he did a tremendous job. And Ten Hag as well. It's a nice feeling to be involved with Go Ahead Eagles. It's not a club which is criticised here in the Netherlands. They always try to do things the right way. They've had some great results this season. You only have to look in the Eredivisie about the results that they've had, gaining a notable draw here in Amsterdam last November against Ajax. Obviously, their manager, Kees van Wonderen, is going to leave the club and he's going to become manager of Heerenveen next season. But they're a club that's well liked in the Netherlands. You know, regardless of whether you are a fan of the top 3, whether you are a fan of clubs in the lower regions, Go Ahead are always a well-respected football club. And I think it was a great grounding for Erik Ten Hag, because, you know, to be part of that club and to gain promotion for the first time in 17 years, it's a long time. It's almost 2 decades. And you know, I remember speaking to Dutch colleagues who would also say that they remember away days when they was in the Eredivisie quite regularly, Go Ahead, and it was a nice train journey down to Deventer. Takes about 2.5 hours from Amsterdam, and it's a club which is well respected and well liked, and I think it really stood Ten Hag in good stead for a successful managerial career so far.
I mean, one of the things we've seen with a lot of current managers, young managers coming through, is that they're taking on relatively big jobs very early on. We saw it with Frank Lampard at Chelsea. We've seen it, obviously, with ourselves, with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer at Manchester United, Mikel Arteta at Arsenal. Do you think that going to a relatively unknown and really small club, by all due respects to the Eredivisie, definitely gave Ten Hag a lot more of a solid grounding, James?
Absolutely. To manage as well in what we call the Eerste Divisie, the first division here in the Netherlands, and then the level up is the Eredivisie. And you see particularly that managerial prowess and managerial experience is completely different. It's a completely different area of football. People like to think that it's Championship manager. Nothing could be further from the truth. I remember an interview I did with former Northern Ireland international Warren Feeney, and he was telling me about the time that he scored a midweek brace in the Championship game, only to subsequently be dropped by Roberto Martinez. And he went into the manager's office and spoke to Roberto Martinez, and he said, "I scored a brace last weekend. Why on earth are you not picking me for the game midweek?" And Roberto Martinez proceeded to explain to Warren Feeney that when you're a player, you're only thinking about yourself. You're only thinking about what you can achieve. He said, as a manager, I have to take into account my entire squad, all my players, the rhythm of games and that kind of thing. And when Warren Feeney heard that, it kind of changed him a little bit, because the insight I've achieved and accrued in the last 6 years of interviews, especially at the highest level, the smallest details make the biggest difference. They really do. And it could be anything from words of motivation, could be anything from a tactical change. I'm sure there'll be many Manchester United fans in watching today who will remember Alexander Butner, and they will remember him as a left back. But he never started out as a left back. He was a central midfielder. He was a central midfielder who was playing well for Vitesse, and then John van der Brom come in and saw something in him and put him as a left back, and his career literally took off. And it just sometimes you just need that little bit of luck. You just need that player to just understand what's being asked of them. I get the feeling, particularly with the Premier League, but it's a big old world out there. There are more than 20 football clubs, especially outside of England, and I think we'll come on to it a little bit later in the programme, I'm sure, regarding the defeat to Benfica, which was a shock to all of Amsterdam, but for someone who's covered the club for many, many years, it wasn't a shock to me. And it just goes to show that massive football clubs that are institutions, Benfica were always going to pick Ajax's pocket. And I think it'd be wise for Liverpool fans to understand the weight of expectation which will be in Lisbon when they play in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I mean, he was only at Go Ahead Eagles, Ten Hag, for a short period of time, but he led the team to promotion. I think it was their first promotion in 17 years, of what I've got written down here, which is a phenomenal accomplishment, James, in a short space of time. Definitely building up those managerial credentials.
Absolutely. And also with the way the club is viewed, this isn't a club that kind of winged it. It was something they worked together. They worked together as a collective to achieve it, and everybody was happy for them. When they came back up to the Eredivisie, they certainly didn't disgrace themselves. They worked extremely hard, and also the level between the first division and the Eredivisie can be quite big. It's simply not the case of being able to kind of latch on and everything will be okay. But it really helped him to ground him as a manager. And then Bayern Munich came calling. And even though it was the second team of Bayern Munich, to work for such an institution is something which doesn't happen every day of the week. So you've got to take that opportunity with both hands.
Yeah, very much so. It was a really great achievement to get promoted with Go Ahead Eagles. And then he gets a very interesting move. He goes to Germany, at Bayern Munich seconds in 2013. Did that move come about out of the blue, or was that something that was always his sort of mindset that he was going to have a go and have a crack in Germany?
Well, I think his personal preference is to also, after Ajax, manage in Germany. He's gone on record on many occasions to say that's what he would like. If I was the sporting director of Borussia Dortmund, I know what I would be doing in this summer. But I'm not the sporting director of Borussia Dortmund. But it was something that was deliberate. He wanted to go, and to work for such an institution. I mean, I remember speaking to Jill Broad when she's now playing at Wolfsburg. I spoke to her when she was a Bayern Munich player, and she's got a wonderful personality, a really friendly personality, and a fantastic footballer that she is. And she was explaining to me that at Bayern Munich, you are treated as a real professional. There is no segregation between men's football and women's football. They are able to use the same facilities as the men. You are treated as a complete professional. And you see with Bayern Munich the hunger that the team has. It's just they've kind of come away from that FC Hollywood tag and become even more streamlined and become even more serious and professional than they once were in their heyday. And that's something which is very impressive. And I think the experience that Ten Hag accrued and working with Guardiola as well, they work together quite closely. Obviously, the link between the second team and the first team, and it stood him in good stead, and fantastic for his CV as well. And no wonder that his personal preference is to return to Germany in future.
I mean, you mentioned they're working with Guardiola. I mean, obviously Guardiola at Manchester City, Ten Hag going to United. I mean, if that was to happen, boy, we could have some matchup there.
Possibly, but my personal opinion is that I don't believe that Guardiola will stay at Manchester City long term. I think there's one more adventure for him. I mean, maybe a little bit too obvious to suggest the Italian league. You know, obviously playing for Roma and playing for Brescia. I know Juventus have been linked before. Lots of the Dutch media like to kind of, especially with the link with Johan Cruyff, try to persuade and say that to Guardiola, would you like to come and manage the Netherlands? But although it might not have been covered here in British media a lot, to give you a bit of a hot take, it appears 99.9% certain that Ronald Koeman will be returning to the Dutch national team after Louis van Gaal finishes his World Cup journey in December. Koeman has been quite honest about the initial talks that have taken place, and he's quietly confident. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Guardiola. But I don't think he'll stay long term. You know, to have been at Manchester City for 5 seasons. Obviously, the Champions League is the coveted one that they want, but it's a very difficult prize and a difficult trophy to get. And I think the matchup against Manchester City against Atletico Madrid, I think with the second leg being in the Wanda as well, I think it's made the task even more difficult.
I think that would have been quite an interesting managerial matchup personally, but as you've alluded to there, it could be a very interesting dynamic what happens after this season and beyond, of course. So obviously Ten Hag was at Bayern Munich for a couple of seasons. He then goes back to Amsterdam, back to the Netherlands, I beg your pardon, and he goes to Utrecht. Was that a surprising move in his journey?
Not necessarily. FC Utrecht like to consider themselves just nestled behind the traditional top 3. That's certainly where they'd like to be now, even though they recently dispensed of their manager and are on the lookout for a new manager. He managed to attain the 4th position and also qualify them for Europe as well. He had them playing some really, really good football. Because FC Utrecht, they hunger for good football. You know, it's a student city. It's a city which is, you know, beautiful and picturesque, and you know, it's only half an hour from Amsterdam, and you know, has a great reputation. And Ten Hag had them playing some really, really good stuff. And of course, the overtures that came from Ajax looked to have appeared controversial in terms of taking him from a fellow Eredivisie rival to the biggest club in the country. But I believe it was all set out. It was all carefully thought out by Overmars and Van der Sar, and it's turned out to be a great decision in that respect. But in terms of FC Utrecht to finish 4th and to qualify for Europe and to have them playing some really good football, he certainly made his mark in Utrecht as well. Yeah,
and of course, when he was there, he not only was the head coach, but he was the sporting director at Utrecht. I mean, what was that like as a balancing act for someone like Ten Hag? And, you know, how could that work, say, against working alongside Ralf Rangnick if he was to move upstairs in the summer?
It was something which takes a lot of energy. It's something where here in the Netherlands, as in football, as in company life, if you don't have your titles, if you don't have your experience, you won't really get very far. You'll often be tested in terms of aptitude for all different roles. I think it was something that could have been balanced for a short period of time, which he proved. But I think to try to do the same in another country would be extremely ambitious. Ambitious. Obviously, we have sporting directors in England, and the way of English football, also the education within English football and how everything works. I think for something temporary, it added to his bow. People may remember that Peter Bosz did exactly the same thing at Feyenoord, and Peter Bosz is now manager of Lyon. And Peter, although Lyon are struggling at the moment, there's kind of some people here in the Netherlands that are hoping that he may well get dispensed of his services so he can still become Dutch national team manager. But Peter Bosz did the same as well. It was like a rite of passage for some managers, but it was more just to improve their knowledge about the inner sanctum of football, because I've been privileged to so much information in the last 6 years, Grant, that you really, when you reflect back and you hear from players and managers firsthand to what they experienced, it really is something to behold, and as well the journey that players go on. If I can just quickly touch on Trevor Steven, I was very fortunate to interview Trevor Steven, who played for Everton, played for Marseille. And he was extremely honest, and also was capped by England, played in the '86 World Cup as well. And he was saying that when he arrived at Marseille, to play alongside Didier Deschamps, who is now the national team manager of France, and he had such an engine on him, had such a motivation to do well. And he arrived at the club, and Brazilian defender Carlos Moser said to him that, you will never ever play for a club like this ever again. Never. This club is like a separate republic. And even now, not just because I've been privy to speak to someone who played for Olympique Marseille, but my personal opinion is that Marseille are still the biggest football club in France. And obviously people like to say about Paris Saint-Germain and the money involved, but people forget Paris Saint-Germain are only 52 years old. The same age as Erik Ten Hag in terms of the club and what they've experienced. But it's important to, when you speak to players and managers, Grant, it's important to always get those little bits of, I call them nuggets of information, and give it to people to kind of help them to understand that, it truly is a world game. I mean, at the moment we're in the middle of World Cup qualifiers. We're in the middle of international friendlies, and you see people saying, "Oh, I don't like it. It's boring." If you're a football fan, you love it because there's always something that you don't know. Like, for example, for me, midweek, looking up at Belgium with their new talent in Jari Verschaeren. I didn't know much about him. I know a little bit more now. And obviously here in the Netherlands with doing so well, Mark Vlekken as well. Mark Vlekken debuted for the Netherlands against Denmark last Saturday. I was lucky enough to interview him 4 years ago when he was playing in the second Bundesliga. And we spoke at length about his time at the Rode JC, his time at Grote Firth. And I reflected on the fact that 4 years ago that nobody knew who he was. And tonight he's being capped by the Netherlands against Denmark, a good Danish side. And I was quite happy to have thought to myself, well, 4 years ago, I sat down with him and spoke about his career. And I don't think when we spoke that day that the Dutch national team would have entered his head. But it just goes to show he's playing exceptionally well for Freiburg. They don't. I think apart from Bayern Munich, they've conceded the least amount of goals in the Bundesliga, and I definitely think he's part of that.
Yeah, very interesting to hear that, James, and that kind of ties in rather nicely with the development of Ten Hag as a manager. We'll come on to talk about the Ajax managerial role in a minute. How has Ten Hag as a manager developed since the go-ahead Eagles days to when he started out at Ajax? Did he always have the sort of mindset of how he was going to play and he's kind of stuck to it? Or has he developed his sort of managerial kind of tactics and the way he wants to shape the team up as he's gone on in his career so far?
Most definitely the second option, Grant. Most definitely. When you manage the biggest club in the country, this is a country of 17.3 million people, and 1 in 4 are fans of Ajax. Or even if you're fans of Heerenveen or Vitesse, or even one of the lower clubs, for example, you maybe like Ajax, for example. But he's definitely got more of an aura now. I think he understands when you manage certain clubs, you need to have a certain aura about you. There's a wonderful, saying in Dutch which refers to, I'll say it in Dutch and then I'll say it in English. It means staat van dienst, which literally means, the aura and the kind of do you have a reference, service that you've done in the past to kind of put yourself in the position to go on to do something special, in terms of your experience? And I really do think that's something that Manchester United have missed. The most successful manager in British football history has left them. And of course, Ferguson is still going to watch them. But I still think, as someone looking from outside, I'm an Arsenal supporter, of course, but my grandfather was a Manchester United supporter, originally hailing from Belfast, as he did, and with the famous Busby Babes and George Best. So I've always respected Manchester United, even though I'm an Arsenal supporter myself. But I think that's what Manchester United are missing. It's not so much the playing, it's the fact they need to have a manager with a certain aura. And yes, of course, Ferguson is going to watch them play, but they need to kind of come away from that. And I think once they come away from that, I think there'll be no stopping them. I think when they finally get it right, because this isn't going to last forever. It's not going to it's not going to be a decade of struggle. It's not going to be 2 decades of struggle. It's at some point the wheel will turn. And it's important for them to get the managerial appointment right, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And I think you made some extremely good points there about the sort of situation and the aura that United have definitely missed over the last years. And really probably since Mourinho, when they won the Europa League and things like that. But even then, you could see that it was not the same as it was under Sir Alex Ferguson. I mean, I'm having a look here at Ten Hag's sort of honours that he's achieved at Ajax so far. 2 Eredivisie titles. We'll come on to talk about the Eredivisie title race this season in a wee while. They're also in the KNVB Cup final. They've already won 2 of those as well. But I think, James, one thing that really interests me about Ten Hag is his reputation in Europe. I mean, you saw them do superbly well to getting to that Champions League semi-finals. They were within a stoppage time moment of beating Spurs to get to that final against Liverpool. I mean, the journey that Ajax have been on in Europe, has that impressed you by Ten Hag?
Absolutely. I've been very fortunate in all the years I've been here, before COVID, that was, to have attended many European games. And every European game is something special. I remember the European games against Marseille and against Barcelona and against Paris Saint-Germain and Benfica when they won in the group stage, when they reached the semi-final. And the season where they almost did it, the momentum, even in the qualifying, when I had to play Standard Liège, there was tremendous momentum. And when the goal was scored by Lucas Moura, and I live in the vicinity of the stadium, I have never known a silence like it in my life. And speaking to friends and colleagues in the immediate aftermath, it wasn't so much the manner upon which the goal was conceded. It was the fact that, is this chance going to come round again? For example, you saw in 2017 with the Europa League, watching the game here in Amsterdam as a citizen of Amsterdam, when you get a mobile phone message from the local police saying, please don't come to Amsterdam, the city is full, then you know that something's going on. And I watched it with friends. But as a citizen, it was still strange to get a mobile phone message a couple of hours before the game, about 3 hours before the game, saying, if you are planning to come to Amsterdam, please don't, the city is full. Because they had, obviously, in the Museum Square and different squares, they had the big screens up, because the pride of playing Manchester United. And it was a great opportunity. But the balance and character of that team with Matthijs de Ligt, Frenkie de Jong, Hakim Ziyech, it had great character. And people forget it was a group phase with the likes of Bayern Munich and Benfica. And I was at the Benfica home game where they won 1-0 due to a goal by Nasser Moussouari. And it was a tremendous win. But everybody kind of, the crowd kind of carried them through. This is a special club and a special city, which, as a wise Amsterdammer once said to me, Amsterdam is Ajax and Ajax is Amsterdam. And nothing, and that's absolutely spot on. When you come here, I mean, I remember when I first came here as a tourist in 2003, I knew the club was big, but I didn't know it was that big. And then obviously subsequently moving here, you see when you go out and about in the city, when the team wins, everybody's got smiles on their faces. In a work capacity, you quickly find out if somebody's for Ajax or somebody's for Utrecht or other teams. We don't meet many Feyenoord fans in Amsterdam, obviously with the rivalry between Ajax and Feyenoord. But it's a very, very special club, and it's a club with so much history. You only have to look back, of course, with Johan Cruyff and with Dennis Bergkamp, and also with the likes of Marco van Basten. Three of the greatest the greatest of all time. And you have two of the greatest Dutch strikers of all time. And they've all came through that academy. They've all done something special in that famous shirt.
Yeah. I mean, that Ajax team that got to that semi-final, they had a couple of really good wins along the way, didn't they? They absolutely dismantled Real Madrid. They won against Juventus, a very famous commentary line by Peter Drury, where the youngsters of Ajax have kicked over the old lady, which I thought was a very apt line. But what impressed me about Ajax throughout that time that Ten Hag was really having a good run in that competition was the likes of Van de Beek playing well. Obviously, he's not really been hitting the ground running in England, at Everton, and also currently at United as well. That's why they're on loan as well. But you mentioned De Ligt there. You mentioned Ziyech there, who's now currently at Chelsea. There's a lot of players that really made their name under Ten Hag, and a lot of those guys have subsequently moved on. Has that been quite difficult for Ten Hag to, make the team again? But then you could flip it the other way and say, Sir Alex did that time and time and time again at United.
Absolutely. But those players as well, they've all got great character traits. And I've been on a few Manchester United podcasts, but I'll say it once again because it is vitally important. It looked for all the world that Donny van der Beek would be going to Real Madrid. It looked to be the worst kept secret in football. And then all of a sudden he turns up at Manchester United and doesn't play. And the most important thing for a young footballer is to play. I've spoken to many young players, and when you go abroad, the club becomes your family. Most of the young players going abroad for the first time are learning life skills. They're learning to cook, they're learning to clean, they're learning to look after themselves. And these are things that you don't hear about at Sky Sports and Championship Manager. In real life. Do you remember Philip Sandler, who signed for Manchester City from Pep Guardiola? Yeah. I was one of the first people to speak to him after that move came out. And I was invited to the stadium in Zwolle to speak to him one-on-one. And I said to him, Philip, how does somebody go from Pep Guardiola to Manchester City? And his response to me was, they really sold it to me. He said, they told me that I would be training with the likes of Sergio Aguero, with the likes of David Silva. He recollected that his medical took an absolute age to complete. And he hardly played. And now he's signed for Feyenoord. But Manchester City have constructed such a deal within the deal with Feyenoord that they can recall him back at any time they wish. So if he goes on to have good spells with Feyenoord, and they're currently doing very well under their new manager, Arne Slot, who's had a tremendous first season in charge, then he may well return to Manchester City in future. But it really is important. You see with Frenkie de Jong, for example. Frenkie de Jong had the opportunity to go to Paris Saint-Germain or Barcelona, and he chose Barcelona. And of course, Ronald Koeman really nurtured him and helped him to come along. Now he's under the watchful eye of Xabi. And it's very, very important for young players because a career goes by in the blink of an eye. And I watched Donny van der Beek grow. I watched him lead this Ajax team. There's a famous goal that he scored against Utrecht. I think you can see it on YouTube. I think if you type in Van der Beek goal against Utrecht in Amsterdam, I think it was the 2019-2020 season, I think, if memory serves me rightly, due to COVID. But anyway, the season before he left. And it was a tremendous goal. And to see him go from that stature of leading this young Ajax team to being on the bench at Manchester United and playing League Cup games at Kenilworth Road away to Luton, it's a bit of a difference. So it really is for all young players. They've really got to understand that they're making a huge choice. Some weigh up the financial rewards, but the most important thing for young players is that they have the opportunity to play and progress.
Yeah, very much so, and I totally agree with your sentiments there. Let's assess this season for Ajax and discuss Ten Hag to date with Ajax. Obviously, we'll come on to the Champions League in a moment because they did lose that two-legged match against Benfica. But they're really embroiled, James, in a phenomenal title race in the Eredivisie. Just 2 points separate Ajax and PSV at the top of the table. They also meet, I believe, in the cup final as well. How big a season is this for Ten Hag? And how important is it that if he does leave at the end of the season, that he goes out with his stock still high?
Very important for him as a person and also for the club. I mean, in an ideal world, you would always leave on a high. It's not always possible. The game against PSV in the cup final will be key on the 17th of April. Also, the remaining games that they face, you might people watching this may remember recently they played RKC who were hovering around relegation. Ajax were 2-0 up, and all of a sudden RKC scored 2 goals to make it 2-2, and then Ajax scored a winning goal in injury time. The same against Cambuur Leeuwarden. They were losing against Cambuur Leeuwarden, and then they came back to win 3-2 with Gravenberg in the I believe 92nd minute. And that luck will not hold out for the remaining games. And they play at home to Sparta Rotterdam, at home to Pek Zwolle. So they've got to be on form. I think the European ties of PSV will be key. How far do they go in the Europa Conference League?
So
a very tough game. But I must say to any Leicester fans watching tonight, I think they did a tremendous job dispatching a very good Rennes side. I remember watching Rennes when they beat Arsenal 3-1 in the Europa League. I went to the home leg in London where Arsenal, even though the scoreline 3-0 seems to flatter Arsenal, Rennes hit the bar, Rennes hit the post. It could have all been so different. They've got some tremendous players. And I don't think the result that Leicester had, I think because the manner upon which it happened in the second leg, I don't think it's been as credited as much as it could have been. But I believe what will be key is how far PSV go in Europe. Obviously, the manager, Geert Smit, is leaving at the end of the season. United fans may well be interested to know that Ruud van Nistelrooy may well be named as the new PSV manager alongside Fred Rutten, who previously managed FC Twente, among others, where Erik Ten Hag played in the past. But Van Nistelrooy, obviously being a United legend, is so ambitious. So even when you listen to him speaking his mother tongue about being a manager and managing for young PSV, he's extremely ambitious, and Van Nistelrooy wants to get to the highest level he can. So we may well be here again in a couple of years' time speaking about Van Nistelrooy to Manchester United. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, that would be very interesting to see him in the PSV hot seat because Van Nistelrooy is a club legend. Let's talk a little bit about that Benfica two-legged match because you alluded to it earlier on. I think a lot of United fans looked at that game and thought, okay, this is a sort of interview in inverted commas for potential future jobs. He didn't get over the line in that 2 ties. You said you weren't surprised that Ajax lost that two-legged match. Why did they not get through this tie?
Well, if I can take you back to the very beginning, when the draw was made, they were initially facing Inter Milan, and the draw was remade, and they were facing Benfica. This is the starting point. This is the start of the 10, when the whole of Amsterdam is, we've got Benfica, and I took the opportunity to tell my colleagues and to tell my friends, if you know how big Benfica are, then you know that this is going to be a really difficult game. I said it from my own experience, having been to Lisbon twice, you only realise how big the club is when you actually get there. Even if you're a football fan that has a great knowledge, when you arrive in Lisbon, as I did for the first time in 2012, you realise it's a massive, massive football club with so much history. And the first leg in Lisbon, Ten Hag was criticised by the Dutch press for making substitutions far too late. And could he have done something? Could he have anticipated a little bit more? And to which he proclaimed that he did everything he could. With the second leg here in Amsterdam, where not I advocate betting, but to give you an example, Ajax were 7-1 to win that game. 7-1 to win that game in Amsterdam.
7-1 on.
And 7-1 to win the game in a 2-horse race. And you saw how motivated Rui Costa was. You've got a sporting director with the Benfica scarf around his neck, and I saw a video that he gave, a speech that he gave after the game, speaking to his players. Where he's the sporting director, and he's saying, we're in the quarterfinals. I think Liverpool will win at Anfield, but I'm certain they won't win in Lisbon. And Benfica have got some great players. Yes, they've got an interim manager at the moment in Nelson Verissimo, but it's for players that they have, like João Mario, for example, and obviously with the teamwork and work ethic that they have, it's very, very important to them. And also with the Uruguayan striker they have as well. It's a fantastic. Darwin Núñez is great in getting in that pocket of space. And he's got so much confidence, and he rose like a salmon to head that ball home. And a well-deserved victory for Ajax, I believe. But for Benfica, sorry. But Ajax did create an awful lot of chances. But at that level, as I've said before, Grant, the smallest details make the biggest difference.
Yeah, I mean, I stand corrected to what I said earlier. It was 7-1 for Benfica to win that second leg. But I was actually having a look at the stats from that game, just as you were saying that. Ajax had 16 shots to Benfica's 4. Just goes to show you, all you have to do is put one more in than your opponent, and you go through. So Benfica managing to do that. Obviously, there's a lot of talk that Ten Hag is potentially United's first choice to take over at the club. In the Netherlands, what's the feeling like there? Is it the feeling that it's a done deal? Is he going to be at United next season? Or is there a little bit more of unpredictability about it? You alluded to earlier on that he wants to go to Germany. Do you still think that might be the case?
Yes. Yes, I do. He's made no secret of the fact that his personal preference is to manage in Germany. He's been pressed on that almost every season. Where would you like to go? Would you like to go? And I think the Dutch press they're accepting that he will leave, but it's not necessarily a done deal to become manager of Manchester United. To be manager of Ajax and then manage Manchester United is two completely different things. Yes, both clubs are the biggest and flagship club in their domestic countries. There's no doubt about that. But the inner workings of working with Van der Sar and Overmars at Ajax, and also the way the club is run with the youth academy, where all the teams play the same way up until the first team, and the money they have to go out and buy good players. They've heavily invested in the South American market as well in recent years, and I think he turned down Borussia Mönchengladbach in the past. I think if Dortmund are clever, I think they'll get on it. And I think with Manchester United, as I say, someone looking from outside, I hear Pochettino. As far as I'm aware, he's not won anything. And with the greatest respect, how can you be manager of Manchester United not having won a single trophy in your managerial career? It's not possible.
Yeah.
My team are exactly, and my team is Arsenal with Arteta. Everybody likes to think, oh, it's amazing. Oh, it's amazing. Oh, it's amazing. It's not amazing. It's not amazing. Manchester United and my club Arsenal, you're looking at two of the three biggest clubs in English football. Both of them have wasted an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money, which more importantly, Grant, we're not going to get back. And it's the history books that will show what happened to that time, and you've really got to really go for who you want to go for and stick with that manager as well. I see people saying about if they'd have only stuck with David Moyes, where would they be? You see West Ham are maybe on the cusp of a European semi-final against potentially Barcelona or Eintracht Frankfurt. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. I hope that for Manchester United's sake, they make the right decision. Because it really is so important, and I'll be very interesting to see what happens.
And of course, another Dutchman that you will know very well, and he talked about it earlier on, Louis van Gaal, has been obviously a former Manchester United manager. There was a lot of talk in the media of him saying that, that this is the words, and you're going to maybe say that they're slightly out of context, but it says here, Erik Ten Hag should join a football club, not a commercial club. Manchester United is a commercial club. Now, you were telling me earlier on that that's not quite correct.
Well, first and foremost, with Louis van Gaal, you've got to remember that Manchester United fans may remember Peter Kenyon.
Yeah.
And Peter Kenyon initially asked Van Gaal to manage Manchester United when Ferguson was due to leave in 2003. And that is where the Van Gaal story at Manchester United starts. And obviously he arrived at Manchester United eventually. Yes, he won the FA Cup, but he arrived at Manchester United too late. If he'd arrived at Manchester United maybe 3 to 5 years earlier, I'm certain they would have won a league title.
I agree.
Having spoken to Frans Hoek, who was with him at Manchester United, and they were saying about the passion of English football, it kind of overwhelmed them at times. You know, Van Gaal is pointed as saying there's a famous documentary scene where he's literally been sacked by Barcelona, and he gives the example of when they beat Arsenal 4-2 at Wembley in the Champions League. And, you know, he said here you had Arsenal fans still singing and supporting the club, and here they get out the white handkerchiefs and they start to wave the white handkerchiefs in Spain. But I think Van Gaal is hurt by what happened at Manchester United in terms of his own pride. But he's happy being manager of the Dutch national team. He's growing. You know, even in his old age, he's realising that he's having to deal with different generations, and he's becoming more and more. It was always liked. It was always liked. There's no doubt about it. He's one of the most finest managers of his generation. There's no doubt about that. But to be in charge of the Dutch national team for what is now a third spell, going to a World Cup, I'm not sure they're going to win it, but I think that they'll have a good showing at the World Cup. But you even see with Van Gaal in his press conferences that he's aware that he's dealing with a younger generation, where what he asked of the previous generations when he was in charge, he can't ask of this generation. And for example, they played the same formation that England played against Switzerland the other night against Denmark. He's deliberately said that he's playing a different formation against Germany and here in Amsterdam on Tuesday night. And also as well, he was saying that Virgil van Dijk was saying the new system, they prefer 4-3-3 as players, but they're willing to see how they get on with this new formation, because Van Gaal is absolutely certain that at some point in the World Cup, something is going to be asked of them, and they're going to have to change it as quickly as possible in terms of formation and approach within a knockout game of football.
Yeah, very interesting there. Sort of last question before we wrap things up, James, because I've thoroughly enjoyed our discussion. If Ten Hag is going to be the new Manchester United manager, what do you think that he will bring to the table? And will it be a case of short-term pain for long-term gain? What do you think?
I think in the first instance, he will go through that squad with a fine-tooth comb. It will come as no surprise to football fans to hear that even Harry Maguire has been much maligned in the Netherlands, even spoken about by Marco van Basten and Ruud Gullit. And if Ruud Gullit and Marco van Basten are speaking about Harry Maguire, I won't repeat some of the things they said, but they wasn't very complimentary about his defending skills. And these are two of the greatest of all time, speaking on the Dutch Rondo football show. But I think Ten Hag will have to go through the squad with a fine-tooth comb and have the confidence to make what I view as unpopular decisions. And if he believes that a player is not good enough, then you've got to get them out the door. I saw a little bit of Paul Pogba arriving for the French national team, and it was all the razzmatazz and all the confidence and the aura of, if you didn't know better, you'd think he was the best player in the world. But I think Ten Hag would look to whip them into shape. But I think that a lot of men coming to the Premier League, they need to understand that you don't get the time. You know, sooner do you go down, and then they're all of a sudden they're talking about your managerial future. I mean, Marcelo Bielsa's story, how that ended was so sad for me, because it's like Simeone rocking up at Nottingham Forest. It's like Guardiola rocking up at Hillsborough. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. And if you remember, what will be remembered is not which game sacked Bielsa, it will be what Bielsa achieved for Leeds United. Because even in this day and age of £1 million transfers, and even in this day and age of quick fix, Instagram, social media, you still need to have room for the romantic side of football, Grant. It still needs to be done. Like we see, for example, with Leicester in Europe. Okay, it's not for Europa League, but they're going to go very close. We see with Rennes in France, they were 4-0 up away at Lyon inside an hour 2 weeks ago. And because it's not Paris Saint-Germain, people are not interested. But if you look at some of the players that Rennes have, Boriscio, Tellier, Lavromaia, these are not household names, but they're extremely hard-working footballers. And I think what is important is, I always say when I do different podcasts, Grant, as a final point, is we always get, in this day and age, people saying, oh, he's rubbish, they're rubbish. My advice to people, and this is someone who's dealt with professional footballers for almost six years now, if you believe in a player and you really like that footballer, stick with him. Absolutely. I'll give you an example. I don't hide my admiration and respect for Mark Albrighton. How on earth he's never played for England is a complete mystery for me. And when I
always thought so underrated for Leicester, especially when they win the league.
Well, he was as important as Jamie Vardy and Julian Mahrez. But when I would do Arsenal podcast, I would be told by Arsenal fans, "Oh, Reece Nelson's better than him. Reece Nelson's better than Mark Albrighton," is what they used to say. And I would have to explain to them, Reece Nelson hasn't even got a career. But yet Mark Albrighton has won the Premier League, FA Cup, and the Charity Shield with Leicester. Hasn't won it with Manchester United, Liverpool, or Arsenal, but with Leicester. And I think it's a damning oversight from Southgate not to pick him even once.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I think it'll be intriguing to see if that Ten Hag story does develop, because there's definitely a few candidates that are in the mix for the Manchester United job at the end of the season going into next campaign. But James, it's been great to have you on All for United to talk about Ten Hag and really learn a little bit more and give me, and I'm sure others watching, a bit of an education into his career. Where can people find you for your content and also for future discussions?
Well, they can find me on my publishers in the past have included footballannu.com, World Football Index, published in excess of 185 of my interviews with the likes of Jamie Carragher, Jeff Thomas, Viv Anderson, and Ricky van Rollerswinkel. The publisher, the Secret Footballer website's the same as the books. Published 60 of my interviews with the likes of Trevor Steven and Frans Hoek, and many players and managers from all different levels of world football. So you can, if you type in James Rowe football interviews on Google, you'll be able to read them. I've done podcasts on different Arsenal platforms and also Manchester United platforms as well. So especially when Van der Beek first rocked up at Old Trafford. So there's always something you'll be able to find, but it's always about producing quality, Grant. Obviously at the moment I'm without a publisher, which is a little bit weird, but I'm enjoying the rest. You know, you don't get to 400 interviews, and you know, you're climbing a huge mountain. But as I say, the ability to interview foreign players in their mother tongue is something which has really helped me to stand out. You know, when I spoke to Brian Roy about his time at Ajax and Foggio and playing for the Dutch national team, he provided a wonderful compliment saying, "James, you're a real professional, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I am a real professional." And the same with Frans Hoek. I think Frans Hoek, he understood that I was British. And the first words out of Frans Hoek's mouth when I spoke to him was, "Oh my God, James, you speak Dutch." I said, "Yes, I speak Dutch to every professional manager and player that I speak to." He said, "Oh, it's amazing." I said, "Oh, thank you very much." So it's always about producing quality. And as I say, as a final point to everybody watching tonight, who may hear different stories that they didn't hear before, they are all true. Nothing is fabricated. It's not via. It's always about telling the truth. And my own anecdotes make that even more special. But it's a world game. You see that now. You know, this isn't about getting one up on the other. It's about providing information and educating players and fans and managers and people. Because I'm sure there's people watching tonight that are maybe in WhatsApp groups or Twitter groups that kind of get maligned for liking certain players. But we only go round once, and you've got to enjoy your football, because we love our football clubs, but a football season. I think people forget how long a football season actually is. So we've always got to enjoy the ride.
Very much so. And James, it's been great to have you on All United to talk about Ten Hag. And as James alluded to, there are so many varied and a real range of guests that he's had on his own writing. And you can go and check those out at the links that he's mentioned there. As remember, please like and subscribe at All United for more content. We'll be back for more interesting insight and analysis and talking points later on in the week. But until then, from myself, Grant, and James, my guest, thanks very much for tuning in. All the very best to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.